Hello, I'm Pastor Ryan, and today we are going to do a bit of an introduction for our Wednesday night series, which is based on um, Dietrich Bonhoeffer's great little book, Life Together. Um, I'm doing these videos because not everybody has been able to attend every week. We're going to try to catch everybody up. And then also, I don't know that I did a great job the first couple weeks in teaching the material. And so I'm trying to make up for that. So hopefully, if you attended, you're watching this and you are learning even more. If you have not yet attended, hopefully you watch this and you think, man, I need to participate in this study. And I think you do, because I think this is like an awesome book. It's a short little book. Parts of it can be confusing, but when we read through it, like it's really good to understand life together. It helps us get a better idea of what the church is supposed to be, how we participate in the church, and how much it helps us to become better Christians. Um, so, without further ado, I'm going to get into the book. Now, the book begins, the very first sentence says, "Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity." Psalm 133:1. And then he continues by saying, "In the following, we shall consider the number of directions and precepts that the scriptures provide us for our life together under the word." And so he wants to focus on the life together under the word. To really get a handle on this first section, and I'm covering like 4 pages in this video. This is also going to be one of the longer videos that we do. So if you're like, man, this is too long, it's longer because I'm trying to contextualize Dietrich Bonhoeffer. So to really catch where he goes in these first few pages, we need to know a little bit of German history. I don't expect us all to know German history. Perhaps some people do because Bonhoeffer lived during World War II. In fact, he was killed in a concentration camp. But Bonhoeffer's life was not only that which happened during World War II. In fact, he was born in 1906 or 1904? 1906. So he lived through the First World War. He didn't actually fight in it, but he lived in it. He did his theological studies at the University of Tübingen, and he wrote a phenomenal doctoral thesis called Sanctum Communio, meaning the communion of the saints, or Sanctorum Communio. So his emphasis was almost always on the church. In 1930, he actually moved. He lived in New York City for a while, where he attended Union Theological Seminary, and he was incredibly impressed by the black church in America and black gospel music in particular. He likes them. In 1931, he went back to Germany. But being a German Christian, he was reacting to or responding to the Christianity that had happened around him. Sometimes in America, we forget that there are other nations which understand themselves to be Christian nations. Germany was one of these, especially in 1917. It was the 400th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther was German. Many of the reformers were German. And so for them, Christianity, Christian history was also a part of their national identity. They had fought wars over Christianity. In fact, the 30 Years' War, if you've ever heard of that, was a war over Christianity. The Peace of Westphalia established that you could be Protestant or Catholic, depending on what your Lord was. And so Christianity had in Germany, when Bonhoeffer was alive, Christianity had a much longer history than America does at all. So, yeah, that's kind of funny, right? Like 400, like America is not yet 300 years old. So the roots of Christianity were deep. They were mixed. There were still some people who were pagan. I'm not saying that everybody was a born again Christian in part, because that term is very much a 20th century term. But Christianity was very much connected to the German identity. In fact, one of the more popular works presented or written in 1917 was the 95 Thesen, which is a reference to uh, Luther's theses, and it provides the German Christianity on a Protestant basis. Um, and in it, it says things like the newer racial research has finally opened our eyes to the pernicious effects of the blood mixture between Germanic and un-Germanic peoples, and urges us with all our forces to strive to keep the Volksum pure and closed. Religion is the inner strength and the finest flower in the intellectual life of a people, but it can only express strongly. It can only strongly affect expression in popular culture through a deep connection between Christianity and Germanness can only be achieved when it is released from the unnatural connection by Jewish religion. And so in 1917, we started seeing some anti Semitic writings being found in the German Christian movement. And there was, there, so like Nazism, which grew in Germany, did not just like appear on the scene. It actually grew over time, and it was very much a nationalism. It was connected to these nationalistic beliefs, and therefore it had Christian support. We don't like to think of Nazis as Christians. In fact, there was a push against Christianity, and I would say there was massive distortions of Christianity, but Nazis themselves often thought of themselves as good Bible-believing Christians. They thought that they were being authentic, and they would say that those who opposed them were not being authentic. And we need to see that. Part of the German Christians, German Christianity, not all, there were infighting, right? Like, there's always discussions and debates, but there was a dominant thread that was growing in German Christianity that kind of had like a masculine Christianity. There were those who argued that Jesus was, there were those who argued for the manliness of Jesus, and they compared him to the Norse god Balder, who was like, macho man. There were those who argued that to truly be German was to be Christian, but that it was sophisticated and intelligent, and that so there was this like masculinity, there was this nationalism, there was this their enemies actually were the internationalist Catholics and the Marxists. Those were the enemies, as well as the Jews, and they argued for manly, strong Christianity. In fact, one of the writers wrote something which says that this is I forget her name. I didn't write down her name. I've got to find this. Guida Deal, who wrote the book Salvation from Chaotic Madness. She has other great little titles called Jesus Christ our Lord, With Fire and Force of the First Christendom, I Know in Whom I Believe, About Renewed Christianity, Salvation from the Chaotic Madness, she wrote in 1931. So she's clearly writing on Christianity and German identity. In it, she writes, this is in Salvation from Chaotic Madness. She writes, "For us women, it was almost unendurable to see the weakness of manhood in the last decades. Therefore, the outbreak of the war was, despite all the hardships, a great experience for us. The upheaval of 1914 was a powerful breaking through of heroic manhood. The upheaval of 1914, a powerful breakthrough of heroic manhood. All the more fearful to us was the breakdown of manhood. Then we called German men. We implore you, German men, among whom we have seen and admired so much heroic courage. We long to see men and heroes who scorn fate, who call us to every service, even to weapons." So salvation from the madness came in part through these muscular, manly men who were standing up for what they believed in, who were winning back their nation and saving it from the communists, the internationalists, and from the Jews. It was, and so the German church faced these internal forces pushing on. Not all believed this, but the German church was organized based on its states. Eventually, after Hitler comes to power in 1933. The German church starts mirroring the Nazi Party, and there were like political parties inside of the German church. Eventually, the German church does end up nationalizing and coming up under one leadership, and this became known as the Deutsche Evangelistische Kirche, or DEK, and this is a newly unified thing, and I think it was in 1933, not long after Hitler rose to power. The German church became nationalized, and it replaced all of these federated churches which had existed. Now, through this unification of the churches, there was some ickiness that went on here, because we see what now seems offensive to us was very reassuring to them. The flag that they used and I'm having some trouble. This was the flag that they used. You'll see the D and the C stand for Deutsch Christian. The cross with the swastika superimposed on it. This was their German and Christian iconography put together on one. And what this would be for them is not unlike the American flag and a cross being placed side by side for Americans. Now, this will offend so many people that I compare it, but we have to remember, like, the Nazi Party was very popular, and this was their national flag. And so the patriotic Nazis especially those who had blended their Christian and national identities, would have flown a flag like this. They also had other images that they used. This was one where you can see it says Deutsch Christian Rettet Österreich, and this is German Christians save Austria, and you'll see the Austrian eagle is being strangled to death by a snake, and on the top you'll see the yarmulke and the very large nose, which is supposed to be a stereotypical Jew. So this is save Austria from the Jews who are choking it to death, and it is a call specifically to German Christians. So German Christianity became wedded to nationalism, anti-Semitism, masculinity, and this caused problems for people. So much so that in 1934, there was a group that got together and they created what was known as the Barmen Declaration. And the Barmen Declaration said that the only source of revelation is the Word of God, Jesus Christ. All other possible sources, earthly powers, will not be accepted. Jesus Christ is the only Lord of all aspects of personal life, and there should be no other authority. The message and order of the church should not be influenced by the current political convictions. The church should not be ruled by a leader, for there is no hierarchy in the church. The state should not fulfill the tasks of the church, and vice versa. And therefore, the Barmen Declaration rejects the subordination of the church to the state and the subordination of the word and spirit to the church. And so the Barmen Declaration set up what became known as the Confessing Church in Germany. And so this was something that happened in 1934. And they did this in part because the DEK church, right, the official main church, adopted what was known as the Arian paragraph. In this, they defrocked. So defrocking is where you decertified clergy, or you say those are no longer pastors. You can no longer pastor any church. They defrocked any clergy of Jewish descent and anyone married to a non-Aryan. So anybody who had Jewish ancestry, even though they were Christian, you couldn't be a pastor. Anybody who was married to somebody who was non-Aryan, you couldn't be a pastor. And that was kind of the last straw for the Confessing Church. And so the Confessing Church was like, no, you cannot wed our Christian identity to the German national identity. And they condemned the Deutsch Christian as heretics, and they claimed to be the true German Protestant church. Bonhoeffer was named the director of the Confessing Church's seminary. And that was in 1935. However, as Hitler gains power, they pass laws in Germany condemning the Confessing Church and saying anybody a part of it could be imprisoned. In 1936, the Confessing Church leader Martin Niemöller is arrested, and Bonhoeffer is kicked out of one of his universities. Then in September of 1937, the seminary that Bonhoeffer was a part of is closed by the Gestapo. And so this happens in September. And then in November, Bonhoeffer wrote The Cost of Discipleship. And then in 1938, Bonhoeffer makes contact with members of the German resistance, and then he writes Life Together. So Bonhoeffer wrote this little book, which we're reading, Life Together, after there has been a massive split in the German church between the nationalists and the Confessing Church. All this time, there also was a Catholic church. Like, Catholics did not get brought into the national church. They kind of are this third Christian identity. And I'm not going to cover all of religious history in this video, right? Like, there's no way to do that. What's important to note is that this book is written by somebody who is participating in a bit of a protest movement against the national church. Hitler was wildly loved by the German citizens, like popularly elected, right? And there's, I'm not endorsing Hitler. I just want to get the context straight, right? We have to remember that Bonhoeffer was pushing against the tide. He was pushing against nationalism. He was pushing against masculine Christianity. He was pushing against the uniting of a national identity with a Christian identity, saying, no, that the church is bigger than any one nation. And he is writing about Christians dwelling together in unity at a time when Christians were being arrested by the government, right? His students and seminary professors where he worked are arrested by the government prior to writing this. And so with this, then we can get into the text. And in this, he says that it should not be taken for granted that the Christian has a privilege of living among other Christians. That statement is both a rebuke as well as an encouragement, because there were those Christians who thought that they needed to be in a Christian nation, and they thought they needed to be living among other Christians. At the same time, the members of the Confessing Church knew that they were not living among people who were super proud or super friendly towards them. See, he goes on to say that Jesus lived among enemies, and in the end, all of Jesus' disciples deserted him. On the cross, Jesus was utterly alone, surrounded by evildoers and mockers. For this cause he had come to bring peace to the enemies of God. So the Christian too belongs not in the seclusion of a cloistered life, but in the thick of foes. Now that is an important sentence that actually convicts Bonhoeffer later. In 1939, Bonhoeffer came to the States kind of as a way to escape persecution, but he quickly returned to Germany. Perhaps because he was convicted by his own words that said that a Christian does not belong in the cloistered life, but in the thick of foes, because that is where Jesus was. And so the opening things which talk about Christians being found among our enemies is because he was found among his neighbors who viewed him as an enemy. And he says that Christendom is a scattered people, scattered into all the kingdoms of the world. But the solace that we have between our life today, between Christ and the last day, is, I'll read it exactly because I think it's great. Between the death of Christ and the last day is It is only by gracious anticipation of the last things that Christians are privileged to live in visible fellowship with other Christians. It is a privilege that we get to live with other Christians. He goes on to say, the imprisoned, the sick, the scattered, the lonely, the proclaimers of the gospel in heathen lands stand alone. They know that visible fellowship is a blessing. And I think that's totally true. People who have been kept from participating in the life of the church know what a gift it is. However, Bonhoeffer fears it is easily forgotten that the fellowship of Christians is a gift of grace, and that there are those who will trot it underfoot because they don't realize what a gift it is. And so he thinks that Christians ought to thank God. It is grace, it is nothing but grace that we are allowed to live in community with Christian brethren. He says that the communal life is a gift that we do not realize what a gift it is until it's taken from us. And he has seen some of it taken from his friends and family. So he knows that it is a gift. He says that the communal life is again being recognized by Christians today as the grace that it is. And I think that we are seeing again what a grace it is for Christians to live in community too. I do, however, fear that some people are trotting the gift of Christianity under Christian community underfoot. I think we can easily disregard the impact that Christianity has on our daily walk with Christ. And I say Christianity, like Christian community is a gift, and it's something we can so easily take for granted. And he says that it could easily be taken from us. The gift of Christian community could be taken from us, he says. Well, his Christian community was taken from him. So when he said that, it was true, because he was sent to the concentration camps. And so Christian community was removed from him. And this first section is just to get us to see the truth of Scripture, which says, yes, that how good it is, how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity, but acknowledging that there are those who disregard such unity, and those who disregard community, and those who disregard unity. And so we will use this to explore further sections. So hopefully this helps contextualize and reframe the first 4 pages of the book. And hopefully, if you're able, you can catch our next episode where we will talk about through and in Jesus Christ.